Hey everybody! I have some great stories for you today, so sit back, relax, and let's get into it.
I have a perfume collection that I started when I was a teenager, slinging burritos as my first job. I have over 400 bottles at this point. I take great pride in my collection and I use it. I'm also happy to give people decants, samples of most of my bottles, let them sample a spray or two, give some bottles as gifts, etc. What I have a huge freaking issue with is my 17-year-old niece coming into my home under the guise of walking my dog, decanting bottles on her own, and selling the samples to her little friends. She thinks that because I have so many bottles, I wouldn't notice some missing or getting massive dents in them. Well, little Miss Entrepreneur failed to realize that her private Instagram wasn't friends only or whatever, and I saw each and every freaking story with each price and sample she had. I tallied that shoot up and got a pretty good estimate based on cost per ounce. Thankfully, she mostly picked the TikTok famous perfumes like Bianco Latte and Escapade Gourmand and didn't go for the most rare niche perfumes. She did snatch an entire 2.5-ounce bottle of Baccarat Rouge, though, which runs $300 at most retailers, as well as full bottles of perfumes you can get at Sephora, like Marc Jacobs Daisy, Burberry Her Elixir, Flower Bomb, etc. Petty or not, I printed out the entire list of what she'd taken, price estimate, and handed it off to my sister, her mom. I said that I expect to be paid back in full. And of course, her freaking sneaky little butt is never allowed in my home again. My sister got super pissy with me going on about how my niece is just a kid, kids make mistakes, etc. I said, yes, kids make mistakes, and this is a great way for my niece to learn from hers. Their argument is that now the money she was going to use for a car has to go towards paying me back. I don't care. She is lucky that I have no interest in involving the police, small claims, or any of that. But am I the jerk because she is a teenager? Now for an update. I'm not involving the police, suing anyone, etc. Please don't try to argue with me about this or convince me why I should. Your niece's actions were not just a mistake. They were deliberate and deceitful. She knew what she was doing was wrong, and she did it anyway. The fact that she was selling your property for profit shows a level of premeditation that goes beyond a simple teenage error. Your sister's reaction is disappointing. Instead of holding her daughter accountable, she's making excuses. It's crucial for your niece to understand the consequences of her actions, and paying you back is a fair and necessary step. You're not being unreasonable. You're teaching her a valuable lesson about responsibility and respect. If she wants a car, she should earn it honestly, not by stealing from family. All right, now for the next post. My brother is married to Haley, and they're expecting a baby together. Last year, I officially changed my first name from Evelyn to Indy, which was a nickname form of my original middle name. My parents gave in after realizing how serious I was about being Indy and how I was not warming up to or growing into Evelyn. My brother and Haley want an older vintage name for their baby, and Haley asked me about 5 months ago why I disliked Evelyn enough to change the name. At the time, she brought up how popular the name has become and how vintage is back. I told her I didn't like vintage names, and to me, it sounded really old-fashioned. I told her the popularity didn't influence my decision. She wanted to know my reason for disliking older names and why I liked something like Indy instead. I didn't mind her asking this first time. She brought it up again a week later and asked the same question, pressing more for why. She asked a third and a fourth time. I gave her the same answer and asked her why she kept asking me. I told her my answer wasn't going to change. By the 7th time she asked, she admitted she was worried her baby would hate having an older name and wanted to figure out what she could do to prevent what happened with me happening to her. She also said she'd like me to rethink my name because she thought Evelyn was beautiful and she was sad I had chosen something like Indy over it. I asked her to stop so many times already, and I even asked my brother to stop her. He told me I needed to understand it was the hormones. I can easily say she has asked me this more than 25 times by now. I'm not exaggerating that number either. 2 weeks ago, when she brought it up again, she felt like I had made a mistake changing my name and how 30-year-old me wouldn't be so against Evelyn. I told her 30-year-old me can deal with it if that happens. She told me I didn't really have a good reason to like the name, and Indy seemed like the kind of name someone young likes, but not someone older. Then yesterday happened, and I kind of lost my temper. She started out asking the same stuff, and the baby is almost ready to be born, so I know it's coming to an end. But she asked me to really think about why and help her because she couldn't figure out what she'd do differently than my parents did. Then she said they really shouldn't have let me change my name so young. I snapped and told her to stop asking me the same question because my answer won't change, and her comments are not changing my mind because I don't like old-fashioned names. I told her I think they're awful, and I'm sick and tired of hearing about how much better they are and having her try to make me find a reason she finds acceptable. I told her just like she hates Indy, I hate Evelyn, and she needs to let it go already. She burst into tears, and my brother got so mad at me. My parents were also like, why did I have to speak to her so harshly? Am I the jerk? Honestly, your patience is commendable, but let's get real here. Haley's relentless questioning is beyond excessive. You've been clear from the start, and it's not your job to justify your personal choices over and over again. Her fixation on your name change is her issue, not yours. It's understandable she's anxious about naming her child, but that doesn't give her the right to badger you endlessly. Your brother's excuse of hormones is a cop-out. It doesn't justify her behavior. You reached a breaking point, and while your words were harsh, they were a direct response to her refusal to respect your boundaries. Your parents should be backing you up, not questioning why you finally snapped. Enough is enough. Okay, now for the next post. My 5-year-old son's birthday is coming up, and he wants a chocolate cake with chocolate icing. It's his birthday, so I said yes. My mother-in-law can be a selfish cow sometimes, and my son was telling her how he's getting chocolate cake and chocolate ice cream. My mother-in-law said she didn't like that and my son should get something we all like. My son said, "It's not your birthday, so you don't get a say." This would be normally disrespectful, but I recently said this to my son when we went to his friend's party. When my son didn't like the cake flavor, we had the discussion about how the birthday person gets to choose their cake flavor because it's their special day. My mother-in-law was shocked, and I told her the same thing I told my son. When it's your birthday, you can get whatever flavor of cake you want. My mother-in-law called me a witch and my son a spoiled brat. So I told her, with that attitude, you won't be coming to the party. My husband was WTF and tried to talk me into ordering his mom a cake she would enjoy after our son and I were rude to her. I said no, it isn't her day. And that just teaches our son to act entitled at other people's parties if we don't stick to the rules and etiquette that we explain to him, and it will just make him confused, entitled, and spoiled. My husband saw the truth in that because our son was excited about his birthday cake for his birthday and now understands that not everything is about him. Other people get to enjoy their special event how they want to. In return, my son gets to enjoy his special event and occasions how he wants to. My mother-in-law doesn't seem to get that and wants my son to write her a sorry note and what he did wrong. My husband and I don't feel like my son did anything wrong by repeating what his parents told him. Now for an update, my mother-in-law said she's not coming to the birthday party or getting him a gift without the apology note. I told my mother-in-law that's all on her. Wow, your Mael really took entitlement to a whole new level. It's your son's birthday, not hers. The fact that she expects a 5-year-old to cater to her preferences is absurd. You did the right thing by standing your ground and reinforcing the lesson you taught your son about birthdays. Your Mael calling you a bitch and your son a spoiled brat is completely out of line. It's not disrespectful for your son to repeat what you taught him. It's actually a sign that he's learning. Your husband needs to back you up more firmly instead of trying to appease his mom. If she chooses not to come, that's her loss, not yours. Stay strong. Okay, now for the next post. I, male 35, have been married to my wife, female 32, for 5 years, and we've been struggling financially for the past few months. I lost my job about 3 months ago, and while I've found part-time work, it doesn't pay nearly as much as before. We've had to cut back on a lot of things, but it feels like no matter what we do, we're still living paycheck to paycheck and even pulling from savings. Recently, my mom, female 65, came over to visit, and she noticed how stressed I was about the money situation. She offered some advice on how we could save money, things like cutting down on takeout, meal prepping to avoid buying groceries multiple times a week, and switching to cheaper brands. My mom has always been frugal, especially when she was raising me and my siblings on a tight budget. I thought it made sense, especially since we're really trying to save wherever we can. I asked if she was willing to go through our spending and show where we could cut down. My wife agreed with this. She made a whole spreadsheet about our spending, and we are spending way too much on fun stuff. We don't need Starbucks every day and so on. It also became apparent that most of the fun spending was my wife's. To be honest, my wife didn't take the breakdown well and started arguing with my mom that her spreadsheet was wrong. She said that my mom's way of doing things is outdated and doesn't work for us. She doesn't want to give up buying organic produce, and she likes having variety in what we eat each week. I tried to explain that we need to make some sacrifices if we want to get out of this financial hole, but she kept insisting that things weren't as bad as I was making them out to be and that we just needed to ride it out. My mom left at this point, and we were still arguing, and she told me she can't give up her takeout. She also went on about my mom being wrong. That's when I lost my patience and said, "You're fing wrong. My mom is right. She managed to raise 3 kids on one income, and we can't even cut back on groceries for a few months." My wife got really upset, saying I am being a huge jerk for siding with my mom, and that my mom is outdated. She's barely spoken to me since, and now I'm wondering if I went too far. But the way I see it, we need to be realistic about our situation, and my mom's advice could actually help us get back on track. Wow, you really stepped in it. First off, involving your mom in your finances was a risky move. It's your marriage, not a family project. Your wife's spending habits might be excessive, but you handled it poorly. You basically told her that your mom knows better than she does about your life together. That's a slap in the face. You need to communicate with your wife, not gang up on her with your mom. Yes, sacrifices are necessary, but you need to be a team. Dismissing her concerns as outdated is dismissive. You need to apologize and work with her, not against her. You both need to find a compromise that respects both your financial needs and her preferences. Now, for the next post. Back in 2008, when I started university, I rented a male 2-bedroom apartment with my ex-girlfriend at the time and my friend and his girlfriend. We got a great deal for it, as the owner of the place lost her job because of everything that happened back then and decided to try her luck abroad, where she still lives. Years went by, and after university, my friend and his girlfriend decided to find a place of their own. As we had full-time jobs, renting this apartment together did not seem expensive anymore, and also did not seem expensive to rent alone after we broke up some time later. So there I was, alone in a male 2-bedroom apartment in the central part of the city. The owner decided that she was too lazy to mess with bills and stuff every month and made arrangements for me to pay everything directly. As I earned her trust, I still pay her monthly rent, which is very cheap for today, and deal with everything else having her authorization. Because of the perfect location, my second bedroom was basically free B&B for my friends who did not live in the city, and I did not mind. It is good to have company if you live alone. In 2020, I met a girl who was in a rush to get married, and as I was madly in love, we did in 2021. For some reason, I never told her the story of how I rented the place or that it was a rental at all. It just never came up. I have been so used to the fact that I am an authorized representative with building cooperative things, etc., that I refer to it as my place. Our relationship started to cool down, and we found out that we were not perfect for each other after all. So divorce it is. So we did the paperwork for divorce, and she is moving out. A few days ago, I received an email from her with a real estate valuation document as an attachment. While I was not at home, she wasted €500 for someone to evaluate an apartment that does not belong to us, and wrote that I probably have to take a loan to pay her the 50% of that. I replied to her, "Didn't I ever tell her that this place is a rental? Why does she even assume that I can afford a male 2-bedroom apartment in the city center? She knows where I work and how much I earn." She called and screamed at me that I had lied to her for years and hid the fact that the apartment was rental. Then she tells me that, well, she will take the car as we got that together. And I was quiet for a moment and then told her, "You do know that is a lease, right? The owner of the car is the bank." Then she demanded that I pay for the valuation, and I replied, "I did not ask you to do it." She called me a jerk and ended the call. Of course, she told our whole friends group how I lied to her during the whole marriage, and there was a discussion in a messenger group with friends that if is it a lie or not, whether was it a jerk thing to do. Some agree with me and some with her. To add, my best friend told me that this is a perfect topic for a Reddit thread. Now I ask you, Reddit, am I the jerk? Wow, where do I even start? You really dropped the ball here. You lived with this woman, married her, and never thought to mention that your place was actually a rental? That's a pretty big omission. It's not just about the apartment. It's about trust and transparency. You let her believe something that wasn't true, and now you're surprised she's upset? You might not have intended to deceive her, but your lack of communication is a problem. And then you laughed off her misunderstanding about the car lease? That's just adding insult to injury. You need to own up to your part in this mess, and maybe learn how to communicate better in the future. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Now, let's get into our next post. I male 28, have been married to my wife, female 31, for about a year. Overall, things are great, but one thing that's been bugging me is that my wife doesn't know how to cook at all. I've always been the one to handle meals, which I was fine with in the beginning because I enjoy cooking, but over time, it started to wear on me, especially when I come home after a long day at work and still have to cook dinner while she relaxes. She refuses to cook and claims there is nothing wrong with not being able to cook. It's been an ongoing issue between us. I have been trying to teach her, but she is really bad at it. Many conversations about this. The other night, my mom, female 56, came over for dinner. As usual, I was in the kitchen preparing everything, and my wife was sitting with my mom. At one point, my mom offered to help, and I asked if she could make the gravy or cut some fruit. My wife was standing around in the kitchen when my mom handed her a knife and asked her to cut some fruit while she handled the gravy. My wife couldn't figure out how to hold it properly and ended up making a mess. My mom watched her fail to cut the fruit and then blurted out, "It's honestly kind of pathetic that you don't even know how to cut a piece of fruit at your age." She then went behind her and started to guide her how to cut stuff like you do with a kid. My wife kind of shrugged and finished cutting her fruit with my mom guiding her. Dinner happens, and I noticed my wife was not happy the whole night. My mom left, and she was pissed I didn't defend her, that I embarrassed her by letting it happen. We got into a bad argument, and I told her that it is pathetic she cannot even cut fruit. She is literally older than me and can't hold a knife properly. She told me that is not the point, and I needed to defend her, and it's not her fault she is bad at cooking. I point out it is, and she is embarrassed because not being able to hold a knife properly is embarrassing for an adult. My wife thinks I am a huge jerk. To add, I cannot keep up. Over 2,000 comments and I have things to do. If you have an info, may already be answered in a previous comment. Now for an update. I definitely think this is weaponized incompetence. I will suggest marriage counseling and cooking classes. If things don't change, I will be out. I will make this very clear. Also, for those asking, it was strawberries. She was smushing them and cutting them with the stems still on. Wow, where do I even start? First, let's address the obvious. Your wife's inability to cook is frustrating, but your approach is all wrong. You let your mom humiliate her in her own home, and then you double down on it. That's not how you support a partner. Yes, it's embarrassing that she can't cut fruit, but your reaction was harsh and dismissive. Instead of belittling her, why not encourage her to learn in a supportive way? You both need to communicate better. If cooking is important to you, make it a shared activity rather than a chore. But remember, respect and support are key in a marriage, not public shaming. Now for the next post. To add, before I get a million put her into therapy comments, we tried twice. She would just sit there for months, even with different therapists. She would not talk. She just sat there. So I, female 42, have two daughters, Emma, female 17, and Lucy 10F. The issue revolves around my husband, who is Emma's stepfather. Emma's dad passed away when she was younger, and I remarried 3 years ago. She and my husband don't get along at all, and she makes it clear she dislikes him. My husband has tried to bond with her, but Emma shuts him out completely, refuses to talk, and ignores him. We all know she will never see him as a father figure, and we are fine with it. Here's where it gets tricky. When Emma was younger, her biological dad would take her to father-daughter outings. We have a lot of pictures of those. Lucy was too young to remember any of them. We thought it would be nice to do again, since Lucy does see her stepdad as her dad. Specifically, they would go to a pumpkin patch and then carve them. They went to the pumpkin patch yesterday and had a great time. Lucy and my husband really bonded and had a good time. The issue is Emma. She is pissed that he took over the tradition with Lucy, that my husband stole the tradition, and I am disrespecting my late husband's memory. I was exhausted from hearing the same arguments over and over. So I snapped and said, "Yeah, I get it. You hate him, but your sister sees him as her dad and doesn't have these memories like you do. Are you really going to ruin this for your sister?" No one owns going to a pumpkin patch. She has been pissed and calling me an insensitive jerk. She is also getting on Lucy's case for going with my husband. My mom thinks I am a jerk here, and I need an outside opinion. Emma's feelings are valid, and it's clear she's still grieving her dad. But let's be honest, you handled this poorly. You dismissed her emotions instead of acknowledging them. Yes, Lucy deserves her own memories, but Emma's pain isn't something you can just brush off. Your comment was dismissive and lacked empathy. You need to find a way to support both daughters without making Emma feel like her memories are being replaced. Instead of snapping, you should have had a calm conversation about how everyone can coexist with their different relationships. Emma's anger is a cry for understanding, not a personal attack. You need to do better at balancing these complex family dynamics. All right, now for the next post. My wife gave birth to our son 6 weeks ago. He's healthy and doing great. My wife is doing okay. Physically, she's pretty much fine, but emotionally, she is fragile right now. She's dealing with some anxiety post-baby, some other mental health problems she had from before pregnancy. She has worked on them in therapy, but the pregnancy and postpartum hormones have flared up some stuff on her. She's also disappointed she couldn't breastfeed. She didn't try to, but that was in her best interest not to. And her reasons are not something she shares openly, but I'm aware, and so are her family who know her history. But she grew up in a home where the women breastfed, and while they understand, my mom and sister are also very pro-breastfeeding, like militant about it. I warned them before my wife gave birth that they were not to try and pressure her or give her helpful tips about it when it was not happening. They didn't listen to me and brought her some info from a breastfeeding group they're both members of and told her there was zero reason for her not to try. This resulted in me telling them to leave. I let the rest of my family stay since they were good, but I told my mom and sister they had ignored my warning, and I gave them a very clear one. They were shocked. They said my wife never expressed a good reason for not being able to. I stated she doesn't need to answer to either of them. They asked a few times after this when they could visit, and I said not until they understand that they cannot cross that boundary that has been set. Now for an update. They brought me into a group call a few days ago and told me they want to come see us, and I asked if they were going to respect the boundary. They told me they just want to help. I told them the best help they can give is to shut the frick up and be supportive of what she's doing. I said otherwise their help is not needed and would not be helpful in any way. They accused me of being too harsh and disrespectful in the way I was talking to them, and they feel like they're being punished for looking out for my wife and my son's best interests. I said they're not doing that. They're doing what they think is best, even after everything I said to them. So they're angry. I told them to shut the frick up. Am I the jerk? Your mom and sister are clearly overstepping, and it's frustrating that they can't see how damaging their actions are. You set a boundary, and they bulldozed right over it. Your wife doesn't owe anyone an explanation for her choices, especially when it comes to something as personal as breastfeeding. It's not about them or their beliefs. It's about your wife's well-being and your family's peace. You were right to stand up for her, but maybe the language could have been toned down. Still, sometimes people need a wake-up call. Your mom and sister need to understand that their help is actually harmful. They need to respect your family's decisions or stay away. Now for the next post.